Kavanaugh and Cosby cases have reignited the conversation about the timing of reporting claims of sexual assault. We know this is a very sensitive topic, of course, and we've been hearing a lot about this from you guys on this one. So I took many of your comments, your questions, to a panel of local experts to get you their responses. So first, I want to thank both of you for being here and taking part in this discussion. It's obviously very important with what's happening in the world right now to have this kind of discussion. And first, what I want to ask is for each of you to just tell me your names and what you do.
My name is Laura Streffler. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been working with victims of domestic and sexual violence for 30 years.
I'm Pamela C. I'm a professor at Florida Gulf Coast University, and I am an attorney and have some experience with criminal law.
I think, you know, one of the questions we've been seeing a lot coming up as we are seeing the situation with the Supreme Court nominee as well as with Bill Cosby, et cetera, is why do some victims take years and years and years sometimes to come forward in cases of sexual assault or harassment? I guess I'll direct that question to you first.
Well, there are a lot of different reasons. The most common reason is self-blame. People either blame themselves for something they did or didn't do as a way to have some sense of control, that if I did or didn't do this, then maybe it wouldn't have happened. A lot of times they don't come forward because they're afraid they won't be believed, or they'll be stigmatized, or they'll be punished either by the person that violated them or by being bullied or outed by other people.
And so many people who do say, oh, they waited so long, their memory must be blurred, you know, this couldn't have possibly been exactly what happened. You work with victims of these types of situations. What can you say to people who say something like that? Well,
that's absolutely seldom true. You never say never, but a lot of times when there's a trauma, and sexual violence is a trauma, people may or may not remember right away. As time goes on, they start seeing, we call them flashbacks, little clips, or their memory gets clearer over time. Sometimes things are a little bit different as far as what they think they remember, and the details may not be 100% clear, but whether or not a traumatic event happened is usually pretty clear.
And the feelings that someone could carry with them for years and years because of this, what is that like for a victim of this kind of situation?
Well, a lot of times they put it in a little box and may try to not think about it. Very often after the perpetrator dies or moves away and they feel like they can't get to them, they feel free to talk about it. Very often something happens to somebody they care about, or their child becomes the age that they were when they were violated, and all of a sudden they start really remembering or feel like they have to do something. Very often people talk about why victims don't report, but they don't talk about why they do report. And a lot of times when people do report after not reporting for a long time, it's because they believe something's happened to somebody else and they're doing it in a sister or brotherhood, or to help save the reputation or the face or the re-victimization or violation of somebody they know, or feel like they're doing something for a greater good.
And this is something that I think I would be directing more towards you, but I've done a lot of research just in the last day trying to determine what the statute of limitations is for situations like this, especially in the state of Florida. But I looked up like 20 different articles and each one says a different thing. Is that something that you can kind of speak to and tell us what is the statute of limitations for crimes like this in Florida?
Sorry, I can't help you. It will vary. And that's why you need to be very, very careful in looking at what an exact statute of limitations might be, because it might be different for sexual assault. It could be different for lewd and lascivious behavior. It might be different based on the age of the victim, and it's going to be different based on the situation. So anywhere from 7 years, 8 years, 5 years, 12 years. But when you're looking at statutes of limitations, those are very important. And I think what Dr. Streffler has said about that is that there's memory issues, and the law tries to address that, to say, we don't know what you can remember from 5 years, 10 years, certainly 20 or 30 years ago. And if you don't remember, how can you be prosecuted for a particular situation or an act that someone doesn't quite remember exactly correctly? The law tries to address that by saying, you know, after a certain period of time, we don't believe that there's going to be sufficient evidence, there won't be adequate testimony, that it will not be able to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's also concerns about the status of the person. What kind of trauma were they going through at the time? What kind of, were they under the influence of some drugs or alcohol that would have affected their memory? Do they remember correctly? Think about friends that you've had and situations they might have been in. Do they always remember everything clearly? When you talked with your brothers about what happened 10 years ago, were you scratching your head saying, oh, gosh, I thought that was Uncle Ted? Memory is not always adequate. And beyond that, too, the testimony of a witness has been shown through many, many different studies to be that eyewitness testimony is one of the least reliable of all types of evidence. So when we're looking at something that may have happened 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years ago, how do you prove that? You really can't.
And that's what I was going to say too. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Well, yeah, and based on what Dr. Say just shared, that's a perfect example of why victims seldom or very often don't come forward, because it's so hard to prove in a court of law. And for many victims, not being able to be proven is almost like saying, I reported, I told, the courts don't care, they're saying it didn't happen, they don't believe me, they're saying it's okay. And just because something can't be proven, it just means it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And sometimes it did happen, and the not being able to prove it feels like a re-victimization, so the victim will just hold it because the only control they have with the story is what they do with it. But the truth is, there is a very small percentage of people that will make up stories to get out of other situations, and those are the ones that get publicized and sensationalized. And you know, there's always somebody that wants to get a leg up, or that wants to get attention, or that wants to jump on the bandwagon. And you know, it's like we learn in first grade, you know, it's like one bad apple, or sometimes it's a couple of apples. But you know, those are the ones that people pay attention to. And a lot of times people that are afraid to speak up, that aren't talking about it because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them if they do, they're penalized from the people, by the people that say things happened when they may not have, or may not have happened the way that they report them.
But where does that leave? And I think it's important to also look at the other side. Where does that leave the person who has just been accused? Because you've got someone here who is unable to defend themselves. Or what if it didn't happen? What if there was a consent? What if this person has no means of defending themselves to say, how do I prove something did not happen? It's just as difficult to prove it didn't happen as to prove that it did, when all you have is a situation where there are only two witnesses.
Now, this panel discussion was almost 40 minutes long in its entirety, and we could only show you a portion tonight on Fox 4 News at 10, but we'll be getting the rest of that up on our website, fox4now.com. And in that, we dive into what's to be expected during Kavanaugh and his accusers' testimonies, and why it is so important for victims of sexual assault to come forward. Again, that will be on our website, fox4now.com.